Hey,
Hey, Kayan, how are
how's
you?
it going? I'm okay. Oh, you're in
Good.
the office.
Nah, just a
Oh.
virtual background.
That's awesome.
Uh,
That's awesome. Is that
we,
actually
we just,
the view from your desk at your office?
or rather, it's not exactly, it's more like it's perpendicular.
It's over there.
Hey,
That's hilarious.
thanks for the invite, man. That's,
Thanks. Hey, thanks for
yeah,
making time. No, I really appreciate it. Our students are, our students are kind of many of them are in the job process now, and so I think they'd love to hear from you and get your sense on not just what it's like to work at Glints and what opportunities there might be at Glints, but also in general about the tech industry and what's going on and what do you think they should focus on as um as entry level software engineers.
right, got it. Yeah,
Hey,
um,
maybe so there are gonna be a couple people popping in the next few minutes. So these are all of our students. Hey guys,
oh,
this is Yong
oh,
Jie.
great. Hi.
Yeah, there'll be more people coming in. Maybe before we start, Yong Jie, maybe briefly I'll just introduce like who are these people and what are they
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
here?
sure.
And then when more of them are here, then I can introduce you briefly and then hand it over to you. Uh, so right, so there will be there are a few students that are joining us today. Should be roughly around 10 or so, and roughly half of them will be, but all of them are part of Rocket Academy's coding bootcamp, which is meant as a career switching course for people who didn't study computer science to then learn programming and become software engineers. And it's a 6-month course, so roughly half of the students today will be from our batch one that start in October, and roughly the other half will be in our batch two that started in January. So batch one is graduating in April. So now they're currently going through the job search, starting to apply for jobs, just compiled all their resume, portfolio, and all that. And then batch two, the other half of them are graduating in June. So they're kind of not quite there where they're applying for jobs yet, but they're thinking about it and trying to get a better sense of the industry and where they should kind of move toward in their learning.
Got it. Never too early to know like, what the end destination looks like.
Yeah, no, and there's no end destination, right? It's like once you get your
Yes.
first job, then you gotta constantly learn and then think about where do you want to kind of move yourself to as a software engineer. So
Cool. And for the rough sense of like the demographic, like do you have like
yeah,
some gauge on like how
most
many,
most people are like 25 to 35. Most people, yeah,
like career
somewhere in
switching
there,
from
and
various
probably the
industries?
majority will be 25 to 30 ish. Yeah, so
Got it.
recent grads, went to local use, most of them, but uh studied something other than computer science, like maybe maybe political science, or some other engineering or psychology, accounting. Yeah, all over.
Right. What if was Perry batch zero or something?
Perry was batch zero. Yeah. Perry was batch zero because what happened with Perry was we talked for 3 months last year, and then the government actually told us to officially stop teaching because
Oh.
at the time we were not yet registered as a private school, and there was some miscommunication about Rocket Academy's course and doesn't need to be registered and whatnot. And so we kind
Ooh.
of continued to coach Perry unofficially after he stopped with the course. And Perry was super motivated, and yeah, I hope he's doing well. Yeah, if he's not doing well,
Yeah.
then that's not good for
Nah,
us. But
he's learning a lot of stuff on an
awesome,
ongoing basis.
awesome,
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, so I think most of everyone should be here. Thanks. Batch two just finished class, so they just joined us. Great. So I was just telling Yong Jie a little bit about the background of everyone here. So I've gotten him all prepped to kind of answer your questions. Now maybe I'll briefly introduce Yong Jie real quick before I hand it over to him. So Yong Jie we met a couple of years ago. It's somehow through the Block 71 coding community. And I think we had a further discussion when we were talking about coding boot camps, because Glints also runs a coding course coding course and kind of outsourcing business called Glints Academy, which is based in Batam. And so there's some synergies about, we're teaching people to code and getting people employed as software engineers. Yong Jie studied computer science at NUS. He was one of the top scholars there, and well, in CS, from what I understand. and is one of the co-founders of Glints. And fun fact is that Glints started quite a while back. So Yong Jie worked as a software engineer for a while, and then was one of the co-founders of Glints. Glints started quite a while back. I think Yong Jie might have joined as a later co-founder, so maybe you can speak a bit about that, joining as later because his tech skills were so strong that he had so much to add. And since then, Glints has just been on this semi-rocket ship journey where they've just been raising new funds and growing, not just starting from Singapore, but also growing much in Indonesia and now Vietnam as well. Yeah, and so Yong Jie has a lot of experience, not just growing the company, but also scaling a technology stack from relatively quite the beginning to something that is quite scaled and large scale today. So very excited to welcome Yong Jie here today and excited for the Q&A.
Cool. I think first off, thanks Kayan for the invite. It's sort of like the gracious intro. It's not, I mean, I kind of feel, I mean, while you were saying that, I was like, oh, is this me? You know, like, are you sure about that?
Get ready for it, man. You're gonna have more of these soon. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess just to give a little more background context, so that I guess to frame questions around, I graduated in 2014 from NUS. I did CS, and then in 2015 I joined Glints. 2017 I took. I think one further backstory is that before I joined NUS, I got into this joint program with CMU, Carnegie Mellon, in the US. But I was supposed to go there like right after my graduation from NUS, but they changed their intake cycle. So that gave me like so they're supposed to have an intake in January. It got shifted to August. So I have this 6 months gap where I was looking out for some jobs. And a friend of mine who happened to be he happened to be my junior class actually in high school. He asked, is there anyone who's going to help us build this stuff? Then I was like, hey, there's 6 months there, why not just do this, right? And for all you know, I spent way more time because it was just way too fun. Until CMU told me a year later that, hey, you can't have too much fun, man. Come back and complete your course. Otherwise, we'll take away your position. So I went back to CMU in 2017, graduated in 2018, mainly for the purpose of getting exposed to some of the things that's going on in the US, especially with technology companies. And here I am back about 2 years plus. So I guess the questions, the way I answer, don't take whatever I say as sort of like gospel for what's happening in tech industry right now. Kayan, I think he has a somewhat different lens as well compared to him. I think he's from the FANG companies. So for myself, I'm more giving more of like the perspective in Southeast Asia, and also like tech in Southeast Asia in general. That's really the focus that I'm looking more into. Yep.
Awesome. All right, maybe we can open up for Q&A.
It's always this silence.
No, don't worry. There are usually a lot of questions.
Yeah, maybe I can start things off. Hi, Yong Jie. This is from Batch 1. Thanks for coming down to do this Q&A today. So, if I'm not wrong, Glints is a Singaporean company, right? Singapore startup, right?
Yeah, it's headquartered in Singapore, but that's not our largest presence. We are most of our workforce is in Indonesia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess my question is, what inspired you and your co-founders to create Glints? Because I think when you guys started, there was already like other job portals, maybe what I call it, fast jobs and all that, right? Indeed.com, JobStreet. I can't remember the rest, but I think there are other quite established companies out there. So what made you guys, I guess, propel you guys into this industry? Yeah.
Right. So what led us to start this and come into an industry where it's fairly competitive in nature, right? Yeah. So our current positioning, right, has never been like purposefully designed in a way such that we're going to do this. It's a lot of things that we learn along. There are many things that we learn along the way. Of course, like some of the folks, the other folks in the industry that you mentioned, like Indeed, Fast Jobs, and so on. So this whole thing started in 2013, actually, when we were still in the same. We were from Hwa Chong JC at that point of time, the few of us. So at the point of time, what we were saying is that it was really just we were really focused on internships, mainly because at the point of time, me myself, much of the benefits that I have gotten in terms of real world work experience, right, has been from the perspective of internships. So before I joined Glints, I actually had I had 3 private internships before this. 2 of them in a private equity firm, 1 in a games company. And what this internship experiences taught me was really quite valuable. And therefore, I think in high school, when we're talking about this, right, the other inspiration point was that we were saying that I think Hwa Chong JC was very competitive, at least for me, it was extremely competitive. And one of the things we try to do is that we had a lot of friends who were trying to get internships, even like past after they graduate from junior college. So the genesis was really how can we help our friends, secure internships they like, and therefore gain more and be more career ready when they get out into the actual working world, right? So at that point of time, we literally had this spreadsheet with 2 different columns. On the left is like the companies that we reached out, and then they say that they're willing to hire interns who are fresh out of high school. And then on the right, we have a bunch of friends who are looking for internships. So we were matching them manually back then. And after that, it got too much for us to handle. So we started a WordPress site, and we just installed some job portal plugin to try to like list all these people around and so on. But I guess like circling back to like the other competitors then, right? Back then we were more or less like we're naive. Basically, we were a bunch of kids who are like 17 to 18 years old back then. And obviously we never did any real competitor research or anything similar like that. Yeah. But fast forward to today, I think just to keep the story short, I guess in Singapore, what you see us do is mostly still a job portal. But one of the prime differences that we feel today is that in a hiring manager's toolkit, a job portal is merely a tool. Eventually, what they want at the end of the day is they want someone to show up in their office at the desk, ready to do their best work and contribute to the company. And anything before that, right? Like the hiring process, the interview process, job search tools, ATSs, these are just tools. So one thing we thought in 2018 when we changed our business model is that we wanted to solve recruitment problem end to end, meaning that it doesn't matter what tool comes in between, but from a hiring manager's perspective, I just want someone to appear on my desk, and that person is ready to contribute. Yeah, so actually that's also why like I Cheyenne and myself we chatted before about this education industry, because like the talent shortage problem that we were seeing in tech is really so crazy that all of us are just like doing our small little part in trying to breach the sort of market, imperfect market as it is right now. Yeah. So okay, so yeah, for fast jobs, job street, all that stuff. We obviously like people will always see both our companies as competitors. But I guess there's a difference in business model. Job street, JobsDB, they charge based on advertising. They charge based on job credits. They charge you job credits to promote your listings. But we don't do that because we are very invested in our customer success. So we only charge if they successfully find someone, and we give them a replacement if that person doesn't work out in 3 months, and we give them a 50% refund if they don't work out in 6 months. Hopefully that answers the question. Yeah.
I think this is a question that you or the company might receive when the HR people ask about what's the comparative advantage of the company?
Yes, yes. I'm quite glad that
Curious
you're
to find
thinking
that.
about this as well. And yeah, to be honest, like this space is indeed quite competitive.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm
Hi,
Jo.
Joe.
Yeah, I have a two-part question for you. And first of all, thanks for joining. And my question to you is, in your experience so far recruiting candidates, what you felt is most missing trait or skills in candidates, and what would you recommend a candidate to work on to fill this gap?
Right. What's the most most common sort of like gap that I see in candidates?
Yes,
And
most missing traits or skill gaps you have seen, and what would you recommend aspiring engineer to work on to fill those gaps?
okay, so for engineering specific, right? Yeah. So I guess the primary roles I hire for is software engineering. So I do come across like quite a number of candidates, and while thinking of your question, I just reflected upon like the couple of past interviews I had, and maybe I try to articulate like what was good that I saw and what was not so great. Yeah. So I think the good things I saw I seen in general is that in the baseline, I would say that most candidates that come by they do have a pretty good from a soft skills perspective, they're quite keenly aware of the kind of where their levels at. Like meaning that, and if let's say they can't answer a certain question during an interview, right? They typically would they typically have this mindset which what we call internally as a beginner's mindset, which is it's okay to always say like I don't know, but here's how I would find out more information from somewhere. This is how I would reach my knowledge gap. This is something that we appreciate a lot from people who apply with us. But I think in general, in terms of areas where we find more lacking is one thing I think I've seen is that people tend to shoebox themselves overly early when it comes to engineering career, meaning that they choose to go into very, very specific areas like purely just front-end development in React, or say, for example, they lock themselves into a very specific technology stack. Like I can only do Flask and Python, for example. So if you hear there's some sound coming from the background, that's my parrot. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, yeah, and I would say that this is one of the most common things I found because I would say one of the things that would help me a lot as from a hiring manager's perspective to solve problems for the company, right, is to be sort of like agnostic with the tool set that you're given. Ultimately, we are problem solvers, but we are problem solvers in the domain of software. So I think if we sort of shoebox ourselves too early into one area, it kind of limits like the kind of learning that you get, and it also limits like the kind of cross topic synergy that you get. So just to give you a real example, right? When it comes to web development, from my perspective, it feels like someone who can grasp like maybe 70% and 70% of front end and back end development respectively is potentially more useful and more transferable than someone who is like 100% just purely front end. So I would say touch a little bit of all these areas. And I don't know if it's a cliche at this point, but build that T shape or pie shape. These days they call it pie because it's like the letter pie shape skill set before closing up the other options. Yeah. I guess it's more specific for like someone who's starting out. Yeah. Okay, then so the second part of the question is like, how do we suggest to improve that, right? Yeah. I would say one of the areas where if you do manage to get into a job already, and then maybe your job scope was purely just front-end development, don't close your options. Be always curious, be always open, talk to the front-end folks, talk to the back-end folks, talk to the database folks, talk to the data scientists, the data engineers, and even the business folks to find out what problems they are really facing, and find out what's in your tool set that you can solve. And if it's something that you can't solve, what's missing in your tool set, and then build that up over time.
Thank you so much. It was helpful.
Hi, Yong Jie. My name is Kenrick. I'm from batch 1. I actually heard of Glints when I was back in SMU, I think in 2015, 2016, when looking for internship. And that time, I think you guys were still starting your website. Yeah. But
Wow.
It's amazing to see you guys progress so far now. So yeah. My question for you is, how is the interview process like at Glints? Is there a take-home assignment for you roughly go through it?
Right. Yeah. So this is specific to Greens. To be honest, right? If you ask me
Yep.
about interview process in many other companies, right, I have no idea. But I'll just say specifically for Greens. And I would say that there are some areas that we are aware of that we do differently from others. Okay. So for us, we follow a quite a structured interview process. First, it usually starts off with a phone screen, and the phone screen, there what we look for is we look for things like what do you intend to learn? What are your plans in the next 2 or 3 years if you join us? And also what's your is there any alignment between your plans and what we currently offer? Because the number one thing we want is it's not about being the best candidate in the world, but it's being the best candidate for that job and for that company, right? So that's important. So we screen for that. And then after that, what follows is typically what we call a who interview. Who interview, we call it who interview is because the main purpose of this part is to paint a picture of how you are like as a person. So we also otherwise call it chronological interview. We will start from the oldest sort of experience that you had. Actually, we start even earlier. We ask how were you like in school? What were you known for? And then after we go on to oh, this is your first job. What do you get hired to do? What were your main priorities? What are some of the mistakes you made? What are some of the accomplishments you have made there? And if your boss were to rate you, what kind of strengths or weaknesses does he think you have? So we'll step through those things. That's step 2. And then step 3, we usually send out an assessment. And I think different companies do this differently. Some companies do whiteboarding, but for us, we don't believe in whiteboarding. I think Kayan has probably gone through so many whiteboarding interviews that
we've been drilling a little bit here. Yeah.
Lead code drilling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for us, we try not to do that. What we do is we of course there's an option depending on the candidate's availability, right? But our default is a whiteboard. It's a take-home project where we'll give you depending on the area that you're specialized in, backend, front end, or full stack, or data engineering, we'll give sort of a representative project that's defined in scope. So we'll tell you that hey, this thing is expected to take 6 hours. You shouldn't take more than 6 hours. And after that project, after you submit it, what we'll do is we will look at your repository. We'll check how's your development hygiene like. And then we'll call you back for a third interview, which is what we call a focus interview. So this is more specific towards technical skill set. So this is where we will ask things like we'll have a half an hour segment to review your project submission. So you get to present that. And then we'll ask you specific questions like how is this going to work? What's going to happen if you scale it up to 1,000 users? How are you going to make it production ready? How are you going to make this code base ready for a team to work on rather than as an individual project? And then we might also ask questions about best practices in terms of writing code, in terms of debugging, in terms of system architecture, security, and so on. At the end of it, very, very final one, which is the 4th interview that we have, is culture. So that's where we ask a couple of culture questions. Then we'll prompt you for examples in the past. So it sounds like a lengthy process, but actually if you condense that to like hours, it's usually 4 hours or less in total, not including the time you take to work on the project. But that's how that's like in with Glints. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this. Yeah, thank you.
Yong Jie, could you share more about development hygiene? You mentioned briefly, right, one of the things that you'll look out for when the take-home assignment is development hygiene. Like, what is this? Is this, what does this entail?
Right. Yeah. So I think one thing that's critically important, especially differentiating, for example, like a solo project work, right? And somewhere where you're forced to collaborate with other engineers in the company is, you really have to get very good at certain kind of hygiene factors. This include things like when you start a code base, is there a README? Is that something that helps someone who's on another service team to get on board? And then the other aspect is like when you make your Git commits, right? Are your commit messages well formed? Do they exactly say, it's not just about saying what changed, but it's about saying why did it change, right? Is it because of a request from a business stakeholder that you have to make this change, or is it because of something else? The reason why this is important is because code bases typically last quite a while. We have to maintain them over the number of years. And just to give you a bit of perspective, like our core API code base, which is the one that powers the Glints website, has been the same since 2015. So that's like 5-6 years of evolution and change. And sometimes there are some decisions we made in 2017 that we like, we implemented this thing back in 2017. And then the only way you can find out is really pray and hope that you find that someone wrote a great commit message that tells you exactly why the change was made. So yeah, that's important. And there are also other factors like, can you chunk your commits nicely? Can you make them into logical changes? It's not like just one change that's like 10,000 lines, changed. The other hygiene factor would be the code itself. I think readability is important. Sometimes we try not to be too clever with writing code. I think sometimes in CS schools they teach things like recursion, but internally we have people who are against that because although like it's more mathematically pure in some way, but it makes it harder for a subset of engineers to read. Then that's where we try to like pull back and say like, hey, can you make it readable for other folks as well? So these are the main things. But of course, in the interview, we wouldn't penalize someone if they use recursion. In fact, we give bonus points. But yeah, those are the things we look out for. Variable names, naming, very important.
So there are bonus points for using recursion. So everyone should try to use recursion.
But I don't think we have ever disqualified someone for not using recursion.
It depends on the problem.
Yeah, it depends on the problem. Some are just more natural. Like we have some problems we are inherently natural in that.
Awesome.
Hey Yong Jie. Yeah, my name is Chikon. I just had a question regarding to a comment you made earlier on, which is how would you make your code scalable to like thousands or maybe millions of users? So I just want to ask that in terms of like the interview process as well as how you guys did it at Glints, since your inception. Yeah.
Oh right, like how do we scale?
Yeah, how do you scale like the company from a tech basis, and also like from the interview process, right? Like how should we think about that when we maybe do the take-home assignment? Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I think I'll cover in two parts. The first one is more related. The second one is more related to interview. So I think I will do that first. It's a little easier. So I think like one of the marks, like for software engineers, right? There are two things you generally have to be concerned about. One is your algorithms, and then the other one is how your system is designed. Because even you have the best in class algorithm, sometimes if your system, the properties of the system that you design, doesn't achieve the required goal, right? Then that can be a problem. So I guess the number one thing that we have to ask when you get any kind of like scaling related questions, right, is to map out what are some of the assumptions. chat with the engineer who's interviewing you. What are some of the assumptions you can make for this system? Is it that you have to serve how many concurrent users? Do we have to make sure that consistency is 100%, meaning that if I make this change, should I see it immediately, right? Then maybe it could be also certain things like, around, can I do this operations in batch? Could I pre-compute it the day before someone needs it? So mapping out these assumptions, these are important. Yeah, so I did then after you map out the assumptions, that's the part where you have to really think on your feet, especially if it's a whiteboard. One of the resources which I feel quite useful for this is highscalability.com. They talk about all the different kinds of architecture that big companies use, like Twitter or like GitHub and so on. The other way is also to check out these companies' engineering blogs. But sometimes for them, their scale is obviously is a different kind of scale that you talk about, right? But it gives you an idea of like, how people tackle these problems and how they evolve as the company size grows. As for Glints, I think just to give you the sense, we are not as huge as many of the like pure play software companies are in terms of transaction volume. So like, for example, Shopee would have like multiple orders of magnitude, more transaction volume that we have. So their scaling requirements is going to be a lot larger. But for us, the ballpark is we serve anywhere between 5 to 10 million API requests in a day. That gives you roughly about like anywhere between 20 to 50, I think. Quick math, I don't know, per second on the API. And we do have some things that are a lot more heavy. So internally, what we do is we have matching algorithm that matches candidates using a basket of factors with the jobs that we have. And one of the constraints we can't do is we can't do this in real time because it's something that requires machine learning. It's something that requires specific AI techniques. So yeah, so you see a whole variety of scaling methods here. For that case, we ask the question like, can we batch? If we can, then we batch. Can we scale out the computation? Like if we throw, if you have now we have 5 servers, if you throw 50 servers at it, does it go a lot faster, right? Or does it remain the same? Yeah, but for the web stuff, I think one of the key things that we have done is really to make sure that each of our services are horizontally scalable. So when the load comes in, we can just add more copies of the same service as we go. And then when the load goes down, it actually helps with cost as well, because at night time, not many people are searching for jobs. Actually, more like at night, less employers post jobs. Can people still search for jobs at 3 a.m.? We do see that kind of stuff. But what it allows you to do is you can now say that, oh, I can run just like 2 servers in like 3 a.m. and then I run like 10 servers 3 p.m. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think there's a lot of resources for us to think and look through. So really, thank you for that. Yeah.
I think pitfall wise, how you think about it when writing code, right? Is have that sort of conscious notion about like what's the limits of your code. Like is it if you throw 1 million records in, how long does it take? If you throw like 1 billion records in, how long does it take? Because what we found out internally, some problems are very simple. Like one of them could just be we forgot to add an index on the database, then things slow down. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks a lot, man. Yeah.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Veena here. So
Hi.
yeah, I looked through the Glints website and I saw this culture codes, and actually it is very impressive. Yeah, I have never seen such a thing somewhere else so it's very explanatory and impressive of what we expect from your employees. So yeah, I would like to know, so as a technical point of view, a new joinee will be having a probation period, right? So in that period of time, what will you be expecting from that new joinee, and what he or she should accomplish in that time? Yeah.
Right. Good. That's a very good question. Especially if you're jumping into like the area for the first time, that's going to be quite nerve wracking, right? I think for our juniors mid-level folk, typically we try to take a phased approach during their probation period. Initially, the first, so when they first join, what we typically have is we have a full-time, basically one of full-timer engineers. We assign a buddy to this person. So this buddy is there to help navigate not just the technical complexities within the code that we already have, but also some of the business context behind recruitment. And yeah, yeah. So, and I think usually what we expect is like the first 2 weeks, which is, by the way, we run on sprints. So one sprint is 2 weeks. So for the first sprint, typically what you get is you get things like bug tickets. These are generally a bit more trivial bugs that should be, I think basically the body would sort of like make an assessment of like, are these bugs high in complexity or not high in complexity, and then it's sort of like their responsibility to sequence like from more easy to, and then gradually expanding the scope to something that's more complicated. Then from the second sprint onwards, usually you will try to work on small little features, small little enhancements. You could be adding like an additional field on a page or something. And then once the confidence level is there, you'll move towards more of like building an entire feature set. And it's all gradual, meaning that first time you build a feature set, you're most likely going to build it with a team. You're not going to be expected to lead the development of that feature. But we tend to take this phased approach over time. Yeah. Yeah. Any questions about even technology or otherwise? If there was some strange problems that you found and you wanted my take, that's also an okay question to ask.
Yeah, maybe I can ask a related question to your time at CMU. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think you mentioned you went to CMU, and I saw on your profile says that you are a master of entertainment tech, right? So do you see like any application of that in like what you're doing now, or is it like just totally different? Yeah,
That's a very good question. A lot of people ask me why I did that. Well, actually, I went to CMU because my initial goal of why I applied for that program before getting into NUS, right, versus me making the decision in 2015, the context was really quite different. So I think after I graduated, my largest sort of like intention there, right, is that I was having so much fun in the early startup that I sort of like tweaked my primary objective of being there. So my primary objective of being there was actually to learn about how more mature startups work, how they operate internally, how they manage the scaling, learn from people who have been there, done that, right? By being immersed in the company with people who have been there, done that. So the CMU opportunity gave me that chance because it was not really it's not like a research master's. It's more of a coursework-based master's program. So our first semester was quite intense. It's like making digital worlds or virtual worlds, like one world, like one sort of game world every 2 to 3 weeks. And on top of that, we also learn things like improvisational acting. We learn things like how do you manage production schedules and stuff like that. But the subsequent semesters, you were actually free to source companies that you want to work for, and then you can be there. And of course, with the condition of you needing to sort of like conform to some of the curriculum requirements. So that's exactly what I did. I spent the subsequent few semesters trying to gain as much experience for more mature startups as much as possible to bring that back to Glints right now. But in terms of learning, right, there were some interesting things that I thought I would not obviously have considered on my own taking this software engineering career path. One of them is improvisational acting. right? So improv acting, I think one of the biggest lessons that class taught was about how do you manage creative chaos. Because although we are software professionals, when we put into the team that's designing a game, right, you need someone who is not just technical in nature. You need someone who is you need like a 3D modeler, you need like a sound designer, you need to have a producer to help you manage your communications, internal and external. So that's where, like, some people start to feel a bit like helpless. They're like, hey, I can't do this whole epic on my own, right? I have to rely on someone. How do I force myself to do that and work harmoniously? And in improv, typically, sometimes, like different disciplines will have different ways of thinking about things. Like sometimes, I think it's very real even now. Like if you talk to many startups, then you might see like a divide between the sales folks and also like the product folks, and also like this kind of like artificial boundaries that are set. And one of the most important lessons I taught was this phrase, yes and. I don't know if, has anyone taken improv here? Yeah. No, right. Yeah. So yes, yes and is all about saying yes to the point that the previous person was making, regardless of how much it makes sense or not. So because a lot of times you find that it plays well in improv also, because in improv, if you try to reject or you try to say like, but I can't do this, but this is not possible, this is technically impossible, right? When we shut down those ideas so early, we might not have the chance to explore what's possible. So yeah, I try to do this for my teams as well, especially when it comes to ideation within a cross-functional team. How can you always say yes and build on and expand on a certain idea? Of course, we must always bring things back down to reality, but we shouldn't stop the expansion that early.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Like applying the yes and. I'm just wondering, like, do you use it in like some of the more political side of business sometimes? Just tell people yes, and I can do something like that. But
no, obviously expectations management is a very important aspect, especially as software engineers. You can't just say yes and build everything out or build anything for anyone who requests, right? But I think the whole point was more about ideation, like how can you solve the same problem using many other means and not just, yeah.
Cool, thanks.
Hi Yong Jie, I am Jeremy. Thanks for coming here to share your experience with us today. I have a question about okay, so when you conduct interviews, right, and a candidate is stumped by a question that you've asked, what are some good strategies you've seen that help them recover? Something beyond like yes and yeah. So
from the interviewer's perspective, or is it from the candidate's perspective?
From a candidate, like let's say I'm stumped, right? They ask me a question, I really have no idea how to start to answer. What are some strategies that I should walk through in order to at least be able to give a reply that is not incoherent or anything like that? Yeah.
Right. Coherence. Okay, so I think the first thing I mentioned quite closely at the start is that it's perfectly okay to say I don't know if you really don't know the answer. Personally, I think that's fine, and it goes to show like sort of like the limits of your knowledge. Don't tell the interviewer to say that. Interviewer asks you like ask you why do you choose this choice of database, for example. Then you reply, then you'll be like, this is very scalable. I choose MongoDB because I think it's very scalable. And then that's where like the interviewer will probably be like, he will grasp straws at that, and then he was like, why do you think this is scalable? Then at one point of time you'll be like, oh yeah, I never thought about why is it more scalable, right? So at that point, actually, it's okay to say like, I'm not exactly sure, because it goes to show like you are aware of like what's the circle of competence and what is beyond you. And next step after that is obviously how can you find out whether it's scalable or not scalable, or are there any other factors that affect its scalability? Then I guess the other part is let's say if you don't want to get into that situation where you want to say that you don't know, right? It depends on context, and I would say preparation is actually quite important in this area. Preparation meaning that before you go into the interview, you should be fairly confident about how to structure certain topics. So, for example, like when someone asks about testing, right? I think, trying to see, sometimes like I don't know if you worked with some consulting folks before, but consulting folks tend to have a lot of frameworks, mental models, and I think mental models are important to help you sort of like structure your answer. And there are a couple of mental models, situational depending on the questions you get in tech. But some of the questions like scalability, for example, the answer framing can always be you can frame it in terms of like, are you gonna deal with 1,000 users or 10,000 users or 100,000 users? And you can always say that I know how to do it for 10,000, 1,000, but I don't know how to do it for like a million, for example. But here's my guess. So you can make guesses, but you can always make the statement that these are guesses, and that from my personal perspective, that's actually fairly okay. Yeah. Yeah, do you have an example of like some question that you might get stumped or something?
It's just that I guess I'm anticipating like going for interviews in the coming few weeks, and then just want to pre-prepare myself like how I would respond if ever I was given a question that I have no idea how to answer to. But so far these are really helpful, especially the second point about like, trying to frame an answer in a way that you know how to answer, and then just being upfront about like these are the circle of competence that I mentioned.
Yeah. Don't play the fake it until you make it game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question, which is something around career paths for software engineers. So many of us were very hyper focused on this initial stage of just doing the interviews and getting that first job for now, which is great. And I think we need to be focused to actually get those jobs. But I maybe want to look beyond the horizon a little bit, right? Like after we get our first job and we're working as a software engineer, what should we be looking forward to? Like what is the general career progression like, and how should people think about their career progression as software engineers?
Oh, this is a really good question. Yeah. This is something I get very often as during my one-on-ones with my reports actually. Literally engineers. It's a very common question about how do we think about career growth and career development. I think there's two parts to my answer. The first part is more of how do you think about career development in general, and then the second part is within the context of the company that you're in, right? Both can be very different in action. Okay, so the first one, which is career development in general for this path, right? I think a lot of people probably came across this very cliche question, which is like, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? And I think as cliche as this question is, right? Personally, I think it doesn't hurt to think about that answer. And I would say that my answer is very likely to be influenced by this concept that's called ikigai. It's a Japanese concept called ikigai. Basically, when we think about our career professionally, it's about alignment of like four different things, which is what you're good at, what do you like to do, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. These four. And my personal belief is someone will be truly happy professionally if they can find alignment in these four different circles. So to bring that back for career development, right? There's some parts that come into play, like what the world needs is one of them, and what you are good at. So I think what the world needs, that part, right, is also quite complicated because I actually have this friend who runs this blog called Common Cog. this friend of mine called Cedric. He's actually one of the people I look up to, sort of like when it comes to engineering management. But what he says is that when it comes to building we're thinking about career. When we thinking about career, it's about building career modes. And when you think about job security, it's not about can I stay employed in my job, but more of if I were to quit right now, can I find a new job very easily and quickly? So that's more important. So skill set plays a huge part. So there's two camps, right? One is you work on some things that the mass market really needs. So for example, now everyone seems to want JavaScript engineers for some reason, JavaScript or TypeScript. And at the other end of the spectrum, right, is a skill set that is so rare and so valuable that only a handful of people have it. Like think about technologies like COBOL, right? I don't know, have you guys heard of COBOL? Okay, yeah. COBOL, super old language from the 1960s. It's still being used in big banks, insurance firms, companies like that. You don't hear that much about it, but I can tell you, COBOL developers get paid a whole lot, and if they try to leave, their managers will beg them not to leave because they're just so hard to to find. Okay, so yeah, that's in general, like how my personal perspective on how I should think about career development, which is alignment in these 4 circles. Second part, which is in the company, within the context of the company. Let's say you already got the alignment, you enjoy the kind of area that the company is working in. Then how can you identify opportunities and how can you grow within that sort of like framework? I must say that different companies have very different sort of like maturity in terms of prepping sort of like a framework to guide you on how to do that. So I know like Facebook, for example, correct me if I'm wrong, they have sort of like internal job leveling system. And in their job leveling system, for every level, they would mark down what are some of the expectations of every level. So if you're, let's say you're like L3 in, I don't know if that's a valid level, but if you're an L3 in Facebook, then you could check and like what's there in L4, what's the expectation of an L4, then have that chat with your direct manager of like, what does it take for me to get the L4? What do you think is missing? What kind of skills do I need to work on in order for me to get to that level? But obviously not all companies are going to have that kind of framework. If you happen to join one of those companies which don't have this there yet, the good news is that I think in tech we tend to operate a bit. The industry is a little more transparent when it comes to these things. So there are sites such as progression.fyi. I think, let me see, let me double check the link. Yeah, so what they have is that they have like career frameworks for different kinds of jobs from different companies. So some companies like Basecamp or BuzzFeed, Circle CI, some of these tech companies, they actually publicly talk about it. Like what do we expect of someone who's like level 2 or level 3? Yeah, I think that's a good starting point.
That's awesome. Yeah, and indeed, yeah. So not just at Facebook, but from what I've seen at most tech companies, there is that kind of leveling system, at least for engineers. Yeah, and so we should always be thinking about what is the next level and how do I demonstrate that I can do what's at the next level. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Yong Jie, Jerome here.
Hi.
Thanks so much for your time. Yeah, just wondering, especially since I guess this is the best question to pose to you, since you're in like Glints and the context of in terms of like negotiation and understanding, because all of us here, right, we all started at different levels and even people that you've seen. So just wondering like, how should we go about understanding, where we are at in terms of the market? Because we can't just look at, software engineering jobs, the market cap is like 5 or whatever, and then we have to be fair to the employers. At the same time, we don't want to shortchange ourselves also. So just wondering how we should approach that. Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's a really good question. To be honest, right, like because I don't come from that same background, I've always been one track tech all the way from secondary school until now. So I'll have to qualify my answer with that first. But I guess based on what I see, what I observe out there, and also Kayan also shared with me like career switchers are sort of like the main audience as well. So that's quite pertinent, right? Because it might seem that in terms of software engineering skills, you might not have it at like a higher level yet, right? But in terms of when it comes to all these other areas that you have already worked in. So for example, if you come from like a sales background, if you come from like another kind of like product management background or whatnot, it can be quite challenging when it comes to negotiation, because especially for some companies where they pay based on pay bands, right? So engineer three, this is sort of the range that we can only work with. I don't have a great answer for that, but I would say that a lot of the things that we do for better oversight, they can sometimes come back and haunt us, and it ties back. So I think I remember. Oh yeah, so one of our friends, one of my coworkers is a friend of mine. So he joined from a accounting background, I think. Oh yeah, and I think my tech lead to be is he comes from a chemical engineering background also. So sometimes certain mental models or frameworks that come from other disciplines can benefit quite well in it, and perhaps at the start it might be pretty difficult to demonstrate that value at the beginning, especially. But I think over time, if you can sort of like leverage that and use that to your advantage, it can be really helpful. John, but I think I want to try to contextualize my answer a bit more. Like, if you don't mind sharing, like which area do you come from before Rocket?
Previous role, I was actually working as a data analyst. So I had some experience like doing machine learning, like it was for Aviva actually. So I guess I can leverage that. But I mean, the roles I'm going to apply for is like software engineering, specifically like probably like front end or back end or full stack, not really the data analytics. But maybe in the future somehow I can find a way to merge it. But
Right.
yeah, that's my context.
Yeah. Okay. So if I were to
I've been a
contextualize,
data analyst for about a year only. Prior to that,
okay.
prior to that, I was doing digital marketing. Yeah, thanks.
I see. Yeah, actually that can be very helpful, because to contextualize the data analyst one, right? One of the key things, especially you're working on enterprise products, is the design of data models. So as a data analyst, you probably have come across like this is sort of like a good way to design your this data schema is very easy to use, and this data set is very difficult to use. And then you kind of know like why is it easy or why is it difficult to use, and that carries forward when you do software engineering, when you're designing schemas for your database systems. You know what's good and what's not so good. And then for digital marketing, same story, right? So if you have done things like if somehow you have a requirement, for us, one of the common requirements is that we have an integration request for someone to bring in like Facebook Pixel or Google Tag Manager or Google Analytics tracking. They talk about UTM parameters in the URL. That's where you get so much more quick, and you can prove your value much faster than someone who is really purely into software engineering. Yeah. So I would say at the start negotiation, maybe I don't have super useful tips. Sorry about that. But I would say that if you can prove your value in like 3-6 months or so, like this cross-discipline thing really helps me move a lot faster. I think that can be really obvious.
Thanks so much, Yong Jie. I guess that's relevant for all of us. So to summarize, it's more of like understanding our previous context and then finding a way to point that out.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm lagging, I think. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks,
I think unfortunately we're running out of time, so I need to kind of wrap things up here. Yeah, that flew by. So I think if others continue to have questions, we will forward them to Yong Jie separately. So I'll ask for Yong Jie's contact information and then distribute that to everyone afterward. And maybe we can end off with one final question for Yong Jie, which is, if you had any general advice to career switchers who are breaking into the tech industry as software engineers for the first time, what would that be?
Right, for the first time. I would say definitely. I think career switching is is something that I personally haven't experienced myself. I would say it's a really brave move. Especially if you have already like so many years invested in a particular career path, right? And making that switch, I would say it's probably not easy. I think if there's one sort of like takeaway I can give for everyone is 100% will be keep an open mind and don't stop learning and exploring and having that beginner's mindset.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for being with us today.
Hey, thanks for the invite.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. See you soon.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.